Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Micah. I'm the union representative for ILWU Local 5. Before we begin, I want to give you a quick little introduction to our union, since some of you attending tonight's event are probably meeting us for the first time. So ILWU stands for International Longshore and Warehouse Union, and Local 5 was formed in 2000 by the workers at Powell's Books here in Portland, Oregon. In addition to Powell's, though, we also represent workers at the Oregon Historical Society, Growing Seeds Learning Community, Wild Lilac Child Development Community, Columbia River Veterinary Specialists in Vancouver, Washington, and Airmark Food Service workers at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Some of our bargaining units that make up Local 5 have contracts already with their employers. And when those contracts expire, they'll have the opportunity to negotiate for different or better benefits, including retirement. And some of our bargaining units are in the process of negotiating their first contract. So they're starting with a clean slate. Some of you joining us tonight may not be union members, but rather workers looking to gain a better understanding of the retirement system. And I'm sure everyone here is interested in a secure financial future. So we're very pleased to welcome Jim Russell. Jim is an authority on retirement policy in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. He led one of the first employee movements to successfully challenge the dominant trend and replace a 401k-like plan with a more secure traditional pension plan. He has taught at universities in the United States, including Portland State University, and as a Fulbright professor in Mexico and the Czech Republic, and he is the author of 9 books. Jim is here to talk about his most recent book, The Labor Guide to Retirement Plans, which demystifies the U.S. retirement system and offers guidance for workers and union activists looking to secure their futures. With that, I'm going to let Jim talk for a while. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's a real honor to speak before the ILWU. I've always just been in awe of the ILWU. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for during the 1970s, and one of the great thrills of it was that I got to hear Harry Bridges, the great Harry Bridges, speak once, and it was at a rally for workers. I can't remember exactly what the whole motive of it was, but it called out union people and so forth. And he came up and he was just kind of very humble, and he said a few words. He was actually just retiring, had retired, and he pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and he read this quotation, which I cannot remember it, except that it was very militant about workers and unions and struggle. And then he said, kind of under his breath, that was from Gene Debs. Now, of course, that's Eugene Victor Debs, the great American socialist leader, but that he called him Gene Debs indicated that he knew him personally, even though Debs was now long dead. And so here I was looking at this history, this amazing history of the American labor movement. Well, I'm very much of a pro-union person. I've been in unions all of my adult life. My wife was a union organizer. My daughter is the director of organizing for SAG-AFTRA. So we are very much union people. And I come at this whole question of retirement plans from a union perspective and more broadly from that of working people. A premise of the book is that those of us in the labor movement don't necessarily know as much about retirement plans as we should know about it. And this is very important because other people look at us, if we are the union officers or the stewards or some other position, to know about retirement plans, especially if they're given a choice of retirement plans or they're trying to figure out what their future looks like. And in the struggle that Micah mentioned, which took place in Connecticut, I interacted with all kinds of union people and could see the tremendous inequality of knowledge, okay, about retirement plans. It went all the way from people who were real experts in them to people who really didn't know very much at all. So the purpose of this book is really kind of to bring everybody up to speed. Now, this is kind of a hard sell because a lot of people think retirement plans are boring. Okay, they think that they're incredibly complicated, you know, so why bother them with them? Or they think they're depressing because they indicate you're getting old, which is a depressing subject. Okay, or they're in complete denial that they're never going to get old anyway, you know, so they don't have to worry about this. But, you know, all joking aside, there are a lot of reasons why people may not pay attention to retirement plans, because if you're in your 20s, your 30s or so, you have a lot of other problems that you're dealing with in your life. And retirement is 20, 30, maybe even 40 years down the road. And so you deal with the problems that you have today. The problem with that is that if you don't pay attention to the retirement plans, by the time you get ready to retire, it may well be too late to do anything about it. Okay, and you may find that you're going to go off a fiscal cliff when you retire. Okay, that is, you'll go from a regular income to something approaching poverty. Okay, and that's essentially the retirement crisis that we have in the United States. I think there's another way as union people that we can look at retirement plans. If you look at the amount of money that's involved in them, it is staggering. Okay, this just came out. Okay, this is an industry publication, okay, of the financial services industry. These are the people who manage a lot of the retirement funds in the United States. And they calculated that there is about $17 trillion, okay, in retirement plans. Okay, and that's only of the top 1,000 retirement plans. And I don't know how many others there are beyond that. So 17 trillion. And then if you consider Social Security, okay, which they're not considering, Social Security has an additional 3 trillion, okay, in assets. So right there we have 20 trillion. Now, 20 trillion is 4 times the size of the federal budget. Okay, so there's an enormous amount of money that's involved in them. Okay, and that's why the financial services industry follows them like a hawk. And that's why they can have a publication like this that they send to me for free. Okay, because they have so much money, right? Okay, you know, so, you know, and I never, I mean, at one point I asked them for some information, and then they started sending me this glossy thing. Okay, who knows how much money goes into putting that out? Okay, well, I would argue, okay, that since 1981, perhaps the largest expropriation of working people's money has come from what has happened with retirement plans. Because starting in 1981, okay, before 1981, if you had a retirement plan besides Social Security in the private sector, it was most likely a traditional pension plan. And I'll talk about those things in a minute, and definitions and so forth. Beginning in 1981, there was a massive shift from traditional pension plans to 401k type plans, or 403bs or 457s. There are a variety of these, or IRAs. Okay, and those plans have been much more profitable for the financial services industry than traditional pensions. And unfortunately, they have paid people much less money in retirement. Okay, and so essentially what has happened is that the collective retirement savings of American workers have been expropriated in this kind of way so that they're much more profitable for Wall Street aligned financial services interests. Okay, so I'll start again with that kind of trying to say why this is important, again, why you should pay attention, not to mention your own interest in trying to have a secure future. If you talk about retirement plans, people always bring up the analogy of the three-legged stool. Okay, what the three-legged stool is, okay, is this idea that your retirement income should come from three sources. Number one, Social Security. Number two, a plan from your employer. And number three, personal savings. Okay. It was always a lousy analogy, okay, because, if I think of a stool, okay, if it's going to be at all stable, it has to have three equal sized legs. And those legs were never equally sized. And worse is that one of the legs is a myth. Okay, hardly anyone has personal savings, okay, that support their retirement. Okay, so we really have a two-legged thing. Okay, and I consider it more like a two-wheel bicycle. Okay, and yeah, as we know, there are all sorts of circus bicycles where one wheel is bigger than the other. So that analogy sort of seems to work. Okay, and the biggest wheel on the bicycle, talking in national terms, is Social Security. And yeah, I do a lot of teaching in universities, and I always try to make sure that my students understand what Social Security is, and none of them start out knowing what Social Security is. I mean, they know what it is, okay, but they don't really know how it works. Okay, I mean, a lot of people think that somewhere in Washington they have a bank account, with their Social Security number on it and money is piling up in it. But it doesn't work that way at all. It's not a savings account. What it is what's called a social insurance account. And this goes back to the 1880s and Germany, which established the first social insurance account for very conservative motives, okay, which we can get into if you want to. Okay, it was basically to win the allegiance of German workers to the German state so that they would have an interest because they would have a retirement account with it. Okay, and the way that the German system worked, which was the model for the American system in 1935, is that employers and workers send money into a collective account. Okay, and if you think of insurance, okay, what is insurance? Insurance is protecting you against something. Okay, if you buy automobile insurance, you're being protected in case you have an accident. Most people don't have accidents, okay, but you might have an accident, so that gives you an incentive to do it. If you buy health insurance, it's the same thing, okay. You hope that you don't need it. I mean, nobody goes, yippee, I get to use my health insurance, okay. If you have to use it, it's probably for a bad reason. You're sick, you've been in an accident. Same thing with fire insurance. Okay, you buy fire insurance in case your house burns down. Most people's houses don't burn down. Okay, and so it works that way because everybody has an interest in having this just in case. So how does this work with Social Security? What are you being protected against? You're being protected against running out of money when you retire. Okay. You're being protected against what is called, in the weird language of the insurance industry, longevity risk, which means that you live a long time. But I mean, I of course think it's a good idea to live a long time. Okay, but what you're really being protected against is running out of money. Okay? I mean, nobody wants to be 90 years old and suddenly have to go find a job somewhere, okay, or go on public assistance. Okay, they want, what people really want is when they retire to have an amount of income that they can continue living as they are accustomed to living. Okay, I mean, it's a myth, okay, that you can use your retirement account to be rich when you retire. I mean, it sounds nice, okay, and there are all kinds of people who write books about how to, you know, do that, or how to retire at age 50 and so forth. But they make their money by selling the books, not by following their own advice. Okay, it's a much more modest goal, okay, which is to be able to continue living as you're accustomed to living, which means that you have to have an amount of money. So in systems like the German and then the US system, all kind of, you know, employers and employees put money into this account, and then benefits are paid out of that account. Okay, very important to realize that this is a collective account, okay, which is very consistent with unions because it's built on the notion of solidarity. Okay, so think for a minute. Okay, you pay into Social Security all your life. You reach age 66 or 67, which is the normal retirement age. Okay, and then you drop dead. Okay, what happens to the money? It stays in the account, and it means that somebody else who lives to the ripe old age of 104 is assured of having income for all of their life. Okay, and how can Social Security do that? Because they follow very closely when people die on average. Okay, if you make it to 65, okay, in Social Security, they assume you're going to make it to 85. Okay, they assume you're going to be in the system being paid for 20 years. Now, if you drop dead, you're paid nothing. Okay, or if you live for 2 years and die, you're only paid for 2 years out of it. Okay, so some people live earlier or live less years, some live more. Okay, and essentially what happens is the short-lived subsidize the long-lived. Okay, and you know, people often ask me, how long am I going to live? You know, of course, I have no way of telling that, and they have no way of telling that. You know, because something like Social Security works on the basis of averages, you know, after the fact. But I always think it's the wrong question. Okay, the real question is, I want to be financially secure for as long as I live. Okay, whether that's a short amount of time or a long amount of time. I mean, nobody's going to die and then suddenly open their eyes and say, oh, I should have done something else with my money. Okay, you know, it's all a question of having financial economic security when you're in retirement. So Social Security is extraordinarily successful in the United States. Okay, it is really the basis of our system. The only thing wrong with it is it doesn't pay enough. Okay, but that could be easily fixed by putting more money into it and expanding, you know, the amount of income that people would get from it. And there are other systems around the world where their Social Securities generally provide almost all the income that people get in retirement. Ours is it's less than that. Okay, let me check our time here. Okay, so that's one wheel of the bicycle, and I would say the bigger wheel. The smaller wheel, okay, is employer plans. Okay, now, for some individuals, the employer plan is the bigger wheel. Okay, like, I don't know, people who have a very good union contract and have a very good pension, they'll get more income from their employer plan than they get from Social Security. But for most people in the United States, it's the other way around. Most of their income comes from Social Security, a lesser amount or none comes from employer plans. So this history that I mentioned at the beginning of the 401k, okay, in 1979, okay, some accountants began looking for a way to supplement pension income. Now, another definition, okay, I think this is important. A pension is like Social Security. It is a collective account where employers and or employees put money into a collective account, and then out of that account, pension payments are made. Okay, it's not an individual account. And like Social Security, those payments are guaranteed for the rest of your life, long or short, as that may be. So it's very much of a parallel to Social Security in the way that it functions. So in 1979, these accountants were looking for a way to supplement pension plans so that people could build up the third leg of the stool, have some savings. Okay, and they thought, well, maybe if the federal government would make these accounts tax-free, okay, for at least until people retired, okay, that would give people an incentive to save money in this kind of way. Okay, now this original motive, again, is to create something that is a supplement to pension plans. Okay, and under the Carter administration, Democrat, this is approved as the Article 401k of the Internal Revenue Code. Okay, then 1981 comes rolling along, and we have the beginning of the Reagan administration, and some other accountants in corporations began looking at this 401k and wonder, would it be possible to give a 401k instead of a pension plan? Okay, and nobody knew whether you could do that legally. And so they went to the Treasury Department. They got a ruling from the Treasury Department that they could do that. And then the rest is history. Like gangbusters, they began shifting away from traditional pension plans into these 401k type plans. Okay, and these are very, very different. Okay, these are not social insurance. These are not pension plans. What they are savings plans. Just like if you take your money to the On Point Credit Union and open up a savings account, that's what this is. The only slight difference is that you're actively involved in investing this money on the stock market. Okay, but it all goes into your individual account. Now, the idea of it is you're supposed to save enough money during your working career, okay, that you can then finance your retirement. And at the beginning, in the early 80s, a lot of people thought, okay, that you would actually get more money from these accounts than you would from traditional pension plans. Okay, and there were all kinds of, models that were put out that showed this. Okay, and of course, a model is only as good as its assumptions. Okay, and if you assume that the stock market's just going to go up and up and up, then you can, make something that looks like people are going to get a lot of money from it. Well, by around 2000, the first generation of people begins to retire under these things, okay, and they begin to realize that they're getting a lot less, okay, than they would have gotten if there had been in a pension plan. Okay, so that's the history of it. Now, why does a pension, a 401k produce less income than a traditional pension plan. There are two broad reasons. The first reason is that 401ks offer an enormous opportunity to skim money off of them by the financial services industry with commissions, management fees, with all kinds of profit taking. The financial services industry itself has enormous overhead. Okay, it advertises all over the place, puts out glossy things like this. Okay, its CEOs make tens of millions of dollars, okay, because they've got an enormous amount of money that they're sitting on, okay, and so they find ways to divert, parts of it. And as outrageous as that is, okay, especially from any populist point of view, it's really the smaller part of why they don't deliver very good income. The bigger part of it is they don't have the advantage that pension plans and Social Security have of risk sharing. Okay, that means there are a number of risks that are involved in all of this. Okay, one of them, the one is I already mentioned, the longevity risk. Okay, how long you're going to live, and that's all shared by members of the plan. Another is investment risk. I mean, investments go up and down in terms of what they return. 2008 was a disaster all over the place. If you were in a 401k and getting ready to retire, you had some very rough decisions to make, whether you could even retire, because there just wasn't enough money. If you were in a pension plan in 2008, on the other hand, maybe the pension plan took a hit, but your retirement income did not take a hit. Okay, it was the same, because pension plans have promises, okay, and they're contractual promises that are enforceable by law. And so pension plans that took a big hit in 2008 knew that in 10 years, 20 years, they would make up the losses and they could ride it out for decades. Individuals cannot. Okay, individuals are much more mortal than pension plans. Speaking of pension plans, the German pension plan is still going, okay, from 1884. Okay, it has lived through Nazism, it has lived through the communist period, it's lived through all the different ups and downs of the German economy, and it's still going, because any pension plan, as long as it's properly managed, can go on pretty much forever, okay, unless some outside disaster happens, like the whole industry collapses or something like that. So that's kind of the main message, okay, about what people should understand. And let me sum it up, okay, or at least end it, and then we can open it up for Q&A, is that there are a lot of retirement struggles that are around. Okay, if you were following the recent strikes at Caterpillar and elsewhere, they involve pension plans, because employers are really eager to get rid of pension plans. Okay, not because they're expensive, okay, but because they are a liability for them, because they have to make good on their promises. Okay, if they give people a 401k instead, they don't promise anything. They just give you some money in your account, and if times get rough for the company, they can stop the money that they give to your account. You can't do that with a pension plan. With a pension plan, because you're going to have to come up with the money, okay, at the end, you have to make sure that it's properly funded. You have always the politics of Social Security. Okay, I think if there's one thing that people generally get in the American public, it's that Social Security is a good thing. Okay, and so there have been several attempts to either privatize it or reduce its benefits that have all been beaten back by mobilization of people to protect it. The last big privatization attempt was 2005 under the Bush administration, and that was his top domestic agenda item. And so starting in 2005, okay, when he came into office for the second term, he barnstormed the country trying to convince people to privatize part of their Social Security. And the more he talked about it, the more people opposed it. So that by August of 2005 had to abandon it. Now, it wasn't just because people opposed it, it was that unions, senior groups, church groups, all kinds of groups mobilized to beat this back. Under the Obama administration, there were 2 attempts to cut back benefits, and both of those were also beaten back. So that's not going to end. You hear that Social Security is going broke. It's not going broke. In 2031, okay, which is 9 years from now, if Congress does nothing, okay, Social Security will have to reduce its benefits to about 80%. It's not insolvent. It's not going broke. You have to reduce its benefits. Congress is kicking the can down the road, okay, but I will bet anybody, okay, that they'll do something by 2031 because it would be a political disaster to suddenly reduce people's checks. Okay, what the Republicans want to do is to reduce benefits. What the Democrats want to do is increase revenue into Social Security. And that's the 2 sides of that struggle. And, we need to keep aware of it. There's enormous attack on public sector pension plans. Okay. While most private sector workers do not have pension plans now, most public sector workers still have pension plans. Okay, and so you have a number of right-wing think tanks that are continually putting out op-eds, continually doing all kinds of things, trying to convince everybody that the state employee or municipal employee pension plans are bankrupting the state. Okay, that's an issue that a lot of people think they know a lot about, but they really have misinformation on it. The reason why, first off, most public pension plans are in good shape financially. Second, those that are not in good shape, or it's almost inevitably because they were underfunded in the past. Okay, and they have to somehow make up that underfunding. So it has nothing to do with the workers getting too generous benefits or anything like that. Okay, it's the whole way in which those things are financed. For anybody, okay, with any retirement plan at work, I would say, okay, every plan is unique in its way. There are sort of general species out there, the traditional pension plan, the 401k, and kind of in the middle, the cash balance plan. You should really study that plan, okay, to have some realistic idea of how good it is, both for you personally and for other people who are in it. Every plan can be improved, okay, and this is for union people. And improvements don't necessarily take more money. They might just take some of the rules of the plan being changed so they're more favorable to people, especially to job changers. Okay, so let me stop on that and let's hear what you have to say. I've answered many questions, but I don't know all the answers. So I promise to tell you when I don't know.
No, thank you. That was very enlightening. I took a lot of notes from myself. We do have a couple questions in the Q&A, so I'll just read them. I'll read the first one. This is from Ryan. He says, for workers who currently have a 401k plan, do you have advice on how to broach a pension plan at the bargaining table?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we did in Connecticut. Okay, and so I love this subject. Okay, because most things are going the other way from pension plans to 401ks, and so I call this in the book reversing 401kization, which is an invented word. I think it's going to be a tough sell to begin with. It kind of depends on what the situation is. If there is an existing pension plan, okay, and then there's also a 401k, okay, with different people in each plan, you have some room to argue that the people in the 401k should have the option to move into the pension plan. And they can often, the way that they would do that is to roll their accumulation into the pension plan, and that could help the company. Okay, so if you can find some way, okay, to argue that this actually helps the company, which is what we did in Connecticut, we showed that it would actually save the state money to do that. If you're in a 401k and there is no pension plan, I don't think there's much latitude at that point. And then you have to kind of start thinking in terms of national reforms. And that's a more kind of abstract kind of thing. One thing you can do, okay, now my brain is percolating on this, okay, is that you can approach the boss, okay, and say, hey, why don't we move from a 401k to a cash balance plan? Okay, a cash balance plan is not as good as a pension plan, but it's better than a 401k, okay, because it is technically a pension plan, okay, where you know, like with a 401k, you have an individual account, but then you're given credits toward an income when you retire. Okay, and once you get a credit, they can't go back on it. Okay, it's there. Okay, even if the stock market dives the next year. Okay, with a 401k, you don't even have that. Okay, if the stock market dives, whatever you've built up is going to dive with that. But with a cash balance plan, you know, once it's in the bank, so to speak, it stays there. Okay, the second advantage of it is that, and this is a pretty huge advantage, is that when you retire, if you have a 401k, you have to figure out how you're going to use this money. Okay, and most people that I run into have never thought about that part of it. I mean, everybody understands you're supposed to build up a lot of money in these things, but then what are you supposed to do with the money? Okay, the solution of the system is to go to a life insurance company and buy an annuity from them. An annuity is a financial product where you turn over to them the money in your 401k or 403b or 457 or IRA, you know, whatever type of savings account you have. Let's say you turn over $100,000 to them. You've built that up throughout your working life. Okay, and the average amount actually of people approaching retirement in the United States is about 120,000. Okay, so you turn that over to them, and then they promise to pay you a certain amount of money every month for the rest of your life. Okay, like Social Security. Okay, I mean, they've got actuaries. They're hoping you die early. You're hoping you live a long time, and you know whether you're going to beat the house or the house beats you. You know, it's, you know, a life insurance company is a cross between a bank and a casino. You know, they're making bets like this. Okay, now the problem with that is that annuities have become very expensive. Okay, so they're not very good deals. Okay, there are very few financial advisors who recommend that people do them. Still, a lot of people do them. Okay, but yeah, if you give them $100,000, you'll be lucky if you get $5,000 a year back from that. Okay, about 5% of it. Okay, the advantage of a cash balance plan is that they, by law, have to offer you when you retire an annuity from their own funds. Okay, so that instead of getting that 5%, you're more likely to get 7, 8, 9% back from them. Okay, now you can approach an employer now and say, you know, the cash balance plan is not only better for us, okay, but it's better for you because there are more tax breaks attached to it. Okay, and you know, and then you get somebody to prepare some report or something about how that would be to the advantage of the employer. So that's what I would suggest doing if you're really in this situation where there's just a 401k and you've got a collective bargaining contract, is to try to at least explore the idea of changing that to a cash balance plan, because that an employer might accept.
All right, thank you. The next question is somewhat related, but I think there's a little bit of a difference, so I'm going to read it too. It's from Tzok. It says, our bargaining unit is wanting to preserve a 401k that currently exists for employees, but we are also wanting to move towards the Western Conference of Teamsters Pension Fund. Do you have any advice on how to incorporate a pension where a 401k already exists and the employer has a mandatory contribution towards the 401k?
You know, a lot of places have both.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the 401k and the pension, and in a lot of cases it's structured in that way. The Teamsters plan is a Taft-Hartley plan, and so I don't know how much flexibility there is in it, but and this may be a type of reform that's kind of trying to work down the road to get it to. Okay, but I would like to see a reform where people who have a 401k and there is a pension plan could roll their 401k money into the pension plan in order to receive more service credits within it. In other words, to get a bigger pension check out of it. In my experience, you know, something like that has to be done voluntarily, or you'll have a lot of opposition from members, because a lot of people want the cash. You know, they are in the 401k and that's the only thing they trust. Okay, but in terms of future retirement income, going with the pension plan is better. Okay, and significantly better. I'm not talking about just a little bit better. Let me give you an example. When I was in Connecticut, you know, I was in this unique position to be able to compare the two because I was a state employee, and state employees were given the choice between a 401k and the state pension plan. Okay, and in 1986, when I began in Connecticut, I made the single biggest financial mistake of my life. I chose the 401k. Okay, okay. And then, you know, a few years later, when I started doing the math on it, I was stunned because I was paying twice as much in terms of contributions, yet I was going to receive half the benefits. Okay, and I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, it would have been okay if it would have been, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 a year or something like that. Okay, but this was so dramatically different. Okay, and very few people knew that, and that's where member education comes in, is to really show what the differences are between these plans. Anyway, I'm kind of wandering around your question. Okay, but that's at least an initial thought on it.
All righty. The next question is from Carol. And she says, any tips on learning how to analyze your company's 401k investments? We have a small 401k committee with bargaining unit workers and managers, but it all seems kind of opaque. Thank you for this webinar.
Okay, it seems opaque because it is opaque. Okay. This probably sounds irresponsible of me or something, but I generally stay away from investments, mainly because the type of system I like to see is one in which the money goes into a pension plan, and then the pension plan hires experts to figure out the investment part of it. With the 401k stuff, because they leave a lot of the investing up to the members, it becomes a question of what kind of choices are there. Okay, now my brain is percolating again. There are a number of lawsuits that are now have been successful against companies because of the lineup of 401k investments, that they did not give people choices of things that were more reasonable investments, or they gave people investments that the costs of them were very, very, very high. Okay, and there have been multi-million-dollar lawsuits against some of the biggest corporations in the country. And since about 2015, those lawsuits have begun to succeed. I describe some of that in the book. So, I mean, it's a cop-out to refer you to the book, but if you want to text me or something, I can give you more concrete information of what the law firms are and so forth, if that's what the problem is with, what you're referring to.
All right. The next question is from Eric. We see all these unions demanding an end to different tiers of pensions. What do you think the likelihood of that is? Can you describe how a union might do that? Is it similar to following the model you did where the lower tiers would buy back into the higher tier?
Okay. I think there are tiers and there are tiers. Okay. In some cases, the reason why there are tiers is because if you need some flexibility with a plan to either increase its benefits or decrease its benefits, you want to do it in such a way that people who are already in the plan are protected. Okay, and so if let's say you have tier 1 is people who have been in the plan, okay, until 2015, something like that, and they entered the plan, okay, this was the idea of the benefits that they were going to get. Okay, now in a lot of state governments, they're trying to reduce the benefits, and so they don't want to. Well, they want to be able to reduce them in a legal kind of way. Okay, so people who are in this first tier, they've got their benefits the way that they were originally promised. And then they open up a new tier for people who have lower benefits. Okay, and that then becomes the problem. Okay, now, sometimes it's not a very great problem. Okay, like in Connecticut, where I was, there are now, 4 different tiers. Okay, but they're not dramatically different from each other. Where the real problem comes is when tier 1 is a pension plan and tier 2 is a 401k. Okay, then you've got a problem. Okay, where you've got really a 2-tier workforce. So it kind of depends upon how dramatic the differences are between tiers. Of course, you should try to fight so that you don't have any, reduction of benefits, right? Okay, but if you lose that fight, it depends upon how severe it is. The last part of the question is what I like, okay, which is to open up the flexibility. Let's say you're in tier 3 of this 4-tier plan, okay, and you would like to have the benefits of tier 1, and you've been saving money on the side. There should be a way that you can buy into tier 1, okay, because it doesn't cost the plan any money, because they can figure out from an actuarial point of view, what the actual value of this buy-in is. But many plans don't have that flexibility, but they could, and it's one of those forms that I'm talking about that doesn't cost them money. Okay, or let's say you have somebody who's been working somewhere else in a 401k, comes into this pension landscape now, okay, is carrying with them their 401k accumulation. They should have a way to buy service credits in the pension plan. Okay, and again, that can all be done on a revenue neutral basis. Okay, you're paying for the extra benefit, but somebody has to do it. And a lot of times bureaucracies are not enthusiastic to make changes like that. So you often have to do a lot of the legwork and then, win it in collective bargaining.
All right. I'm going to do a last call for more questions before we close out, just in case anyone's typing away. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Jim. This has been very informative. I'm now going to spend probably the rest of my week looking at all my 401k stuff. Also, thank you everyone who attended tonight. We just got another question. Where do you recommend people go to find out information on retirement besides your book, of course?
I actually answered that question on somebody's website, okay, of what books I recommend. Okay, so I'm prepared. Okay, first, I would look up Social Security Works, okay, by Altman, by Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson. Okay, that's the best book on Social Security. Okay, and every time you have a question, you'll turn the page and it'll be answered. I mean, it's very, very concrete on there. Then there is a book called Pension Heist by Ellen, I'm blanking on her last name. Okay, but Pension Heist is the name of it. Okay, which argues that the reason that a lot of pensions were ended in the private sector was not because they were too expensive. They were actually in very good financial shape. It's that the corporations found ways to monetize surpluses within them. Okay, an example since that book is the Washington Post. The Washington Post had a pension of that was 140% funded, which means that it had 40% more money than it needed to pay all of its benefits. So it was extraordinarily successful. Okay. Jeff Bezos, great friend of books, buys the Washington Post and he ends their pension plan. Okay. Even though it was a tremendously successful plan. Now, why would he do that? Because the law says that, who owns this other 40%? Okay, and the way the law has come down is a corporation can end a pension and take that 40% more than it needs to pay off all the, people who are in it, as long as it does it in the benefit of the workers. Okay, that sounds good. Except what that means is that he can then shift the 40% to pay part of his medical insurance bills. Okay, so, so they're making money by essentially expropriating the money that's in the pension plan. So there's a lot of corporate shenanigans that book really goes into in ways in which pensions were given a shove over the cliff.
Just going to buy 2 more books. All right, cool. Well, thank you again. And it's already been shared in the chat, but if you'd like to order a copy of Jim's book, we posted that in the chat. We also posted the Powell's Partner link in the chat where you can click through that to buy books from Powell's online. And if you buy them through our partner link, then 7.5% of every sale goes towards the ILWU Local 5 Strike Fund, which is a fund that we keep and maintain to assist our members in the event of a strike. So thank you all, and thank you again, Jim. And we're getting some thank yous coming in from the chat. Thank you. This was a great event. And it was great.
Thanks a lot, Micah. It's really been wonderful.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, Jim.